this seems like a very significant warning to Xbox people, not just Xbox people, but in general, gaming and the gaming universe and things like that. I think that this is going to be a very interesting topic, and I'm sure that there's going to be a lot of people talking about it in the comments and just in general, because I think a lot of people kind of change their mind on this subject quite a bit. It really kind of depends on where you stand with this stuff. For me anyway, I always kind of look at it as something where I'm enjoying it while it lasts, and then we'll see what happens in the future with it, and if that's something that changes with kind of how gaming is changing or whatever. I think all that kind of is just going to be dependent on how this kind of ends up. But with that being said, this should be a very interesting topic, and like I said, I always like hearing from you guys and seeing how you guys react to the news and things like that, because it is something where we all kind of maybe will not agree, but hey, you know what, I'm sure there's going to be some people that agree with me or this take or whatever the case may be, and we're going to be able to kind of get an idea of that from this. So let's go ahead and get into it. Hey everybody, I'm Crap Gamer. This is Crap Gamer Reviews, back with another video. Thank you so much for checking it out. I certainly do appreciate it. Please like, share, subscribe. I would personally appreciate that as well. It means a lot to me personally. I do daily gaming content, so if you didn't know, yep, you're looking for somebody that does something every single day. That's what I do. That's what I do. That's what I have a good time with. So let's go ahead and get that out in the open. And not only do I enjoy that, but it's just something that I like to give my take and my fun little opinions about. So we'll see how it works. We'll see exactly what can happen in the future with that. But for me right now, this is very, very interesting, because this is a former Bethesda executive saying game subscription services are worth jack squat without proper support from game developers. Bethesda Software former senior vice president of global marketing and communications, Pete Hines, you guys know he's sending out a warning saying gaming subscription services like Game Pass are worth jack squat if the developers who create content for them are not properly supported. The ex-Bethesda figurehead, who announced his retirement in 2023 after 24 years with the company, opened up about the state of gaming industry with a new interview. In addition, touching on some early days of company behind Fallout and the Elder Scrolls, he spoke about what he feels is the future of services like Game Pass and what it looks like. He admits his retirement from Microsoft-owned Bethesda means his view on the matter may not be up to date. However, Hines says he witnessed what he considered to be some short-sighted decisions making several years ago. Now that appears to be bearing out the way he originally said it would. And I quote, "Subscriptions have become the new four-letter word, right? You can't buy a product anymore. When you talk about a subscription that relies on content, if you don't figure out how to balance the needs of the service and the people running the service with the people who are providing the content, without your subscription service, it's worth jack squat. Then you have a real problem." Gamers have discussed the viability of platforms like Game Pass since its launch way back in 2017. While a service flooded with hundreds of games for subscribers to play sounds like a dream come true for players, how the developers behind these games receive support has been hazy at best. As Game Pass kind of pushed forward into the early 2020s and PlayStation eventually established its own kind of PlayStation-centered competitor, more question marks popped up. Former PlayStation boss Sean Layden is one of the many who recently critiqued the gaming subscription service model, calling the Netflix of gaming idea a danger that has him questioning, is it healthy for the developer? Microsoft, of course, touted that Game Pass achieved $5 billion in revenue over the past year this July after laying off thousands of workers across its gaming branch and entire company. Now Hines adds that the pressure of the ongoing gaming subscription service is affecting the very developers it needs to exist in the first place. It's a reliance on this model that he feels is hurting a lot of people. He says, and I quote, "You need to properly acknowledge, compensate, and recognize what it takes to create that content and not just make a game, but make a product. The tension is hurting a lot of people, including the content creators themselves, because they're fitting into an ecosystem that is not properly valuing and rewarding what they're making." Two Bethesda studios, Redfall developer Arcane Austin and Hi-Fi Rush developer Tango Gameworks, were shut down in May of 2024, though the latter was eventually saved after PUBG publisher Krafton acquired it from Xbox. Now, in the wake of layoffs and studio closures, original Arcane founder called Game Pass the elephant in the room and an unsustainable model. He added, "I don't think Game Pass can coexist with other models. They'll either kill everyone else or give up." So again, like a very interesting take from somebody who used to work at Microsoft. Microsoft has always had problems with like keeping talent and keeping talent happy. So the thing that I would say is, I think Game Pass right now, we could just kind of look at it as a bit of a mixed bag, to say the least, because there's some developers who love it, some that don't like it. If you're a first-party developer, you're not making anything extra from putting your game in Game Pass. You're getting paid your fee regardless. So, it's one of those weird things. I think the third-party thing is a little bit more interesting because you have some people, I guess, take a lump sum up front. Some people will take some money up front and then want percentages of whoever downloads it. But either way, you're pretty much completely at the mercy of Microsoft themselves when it comes down to that stuff, because at the same point in time, it does seem like really only the cool kids that Microsoft think are worthy are going to make it into Game Pass, and sometimes you have a hit, but a lot of the times, and we've seen this lately too with some announcements where somebody who worked for Machine Games was talking about Indiana Jones, and he's like, people on Game Pass jump into a game for 5 minutes and then leave. And so that's something that I think a lot of people probably maybe if you didn't realize it, you probably should. Like, it's like Netflix, right? Does anybody watch everything that's on Netflix? I wouldn't think that they do, but at the same point in time, it's just one of those things where probably people will watch something for 5 minutes or 10 minutes or whatever the case may be, and then kind of see what happens from that point, but it takes a real hook, to be honest with you, to be able to kind of get in there and kind of see how like people are changing things and seeing how gamers kind of change their gaming habits and things like that. So when Microsoft says something like people who subscribe to Game Pass game more than anybody else, I mean, what does that mean exactly? You know what I'm saying? Because like somebody who games on Call of Duty might game on Call of Duty 3 hours a day for months and months and months and months. Somebody on Game Pass might try 100 different games, but they're only playing these games for like 5 minutes or whatever. And I think that's probably a little bit disappointing. And it's like, I had this feeling, and I felt this for a long time. Like any game that I buy, I'm definitely going to feel much more attached to and much more interested in than, say, a game that was free to play or whatever. And this is why I was never really a big fan of like the free to play games back in the day, because free to play games, basically what they're doing is kind of taking you out of the idea of owning something. And so you're always, like, in my opinion anyway, you're always going to be more apt to play through something or stick with something that you paid money for versus something like in a rental service like Game Pass. And I think Game Pass is a great service, but I also just happen to think that there's a lot of unanswered questions there, and maybe we won't get those answers for a while. But I hope when we do get the answers, it doesn't mean hey, if you decided to put your game in Game Pass or whatever, that your game is screwed or that the industry is screwed or whatever the case may be, because that would be detrimental to the entire gaming stratosphere, and that is something that we could definitely do without, in my opinion. So hopefully we see some better metrics and things like this in the future. I'm excited to see what happens, but at the same point in time, I'm not holding my breath that Game Pass is exactly good for a lot of people outside of maybe Microsoft, I guess. But does the content get rushed out? Is it are they catering it towards that? It's like sometimes I can see why it's good, but it's like some things are a little bit perplexing, like Gears of War 5, right? That was in Game Pass, and then the expansion was also in Game Pass. Indiana Jones, that's in Game Pass, but their recent expansion wasn't. They want people to pay $20 for it. So it's like, what are you gonna do at the end of the day? Like, I think it's a little bit of a weird scenario and situation, but Uncle Pete out there kind of speaking his mind, and we've heard from other people as well kind of speaking their mind that Game Pass might not be all that is cracked up to be, or that fans try to insinuate that it is. Like I said, for me, I look at it as, yes, it's a value for me right now, but I buy games, like, mostly, you know what I'm saying? It's like, for me anyway, it'd be foolish not to. But I hate the world that we kind of live in, where you don't own things, and people seem to be okay with that. Like, more times people talk about cloud or whatever, and they're the people that are on board with cloud. I'm like, how can you be on with that? The only way you could play that is, like, right next to a router or something. If you had, like, phenomenal internet, that's going to shut a lot of people out. And then, if you're talking about multiplayer, you got even more input lag. Like, that's not, and you can't own it. You can only play it with an internet connection. It's crazy. But anyway, let me know what you guys think. Rack 'em up. Crap Gamer out.